If you're trying to get the most out of your nanite meshes and you want to animate them, then watch this tutorial and I'll show you how to do just that by using a few clever tricks. So let's have a look. Hello everyone and welcome to Arganian's Puzzle Box. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to animate nanite meshes, which is using a different method than what I've used before when I showed you another tutorial on how to animate nanite meshes by using the socket function. This is something that they did with the Valley of the Ancient. They've used sockets, but in this particular tutorial I'm going to show you a different approach where you don't need to have any sockets or anything like that. You just animate via the material editor, and this is a very interesting thing because it allows you to control things that normally you would have to add bones and all sorts of complicated animations to it. In this particular case we're just animating static meshes, and if we want to we can also animate skeletal meshes. But these static meshes are nanite, so that means that we are effectively moving objects in the world that otherwise wouldn't be able to be moved. And this is possible to be done because we're using the world position offset, which is something that's been added recently in 5.1, where you could actually use nanite for foliage and you're able to animate that foliage. So this is how we're kind of approaching this, but you'll learn some other things while doing this, other things that you did not know, some clever tricks I would say, to be able to employ them within your material shader, and will allow you to have far more control of over your meshes than ever before. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this method for your hero assets. So for example, maybe something that's in a first-person shooter where you have your gun in your hand or something like that, because I think that there are better ways to achieving this, but you can. I'm just saying that the animation may not be as good as you would hope, or even if it is, you'd have to do quite a bit of thinking before you can get it running correctly. But more importantly, these are very useful for things like objects in the background. Imagine vents, imagine doors, imagine elements that change within the scene, and now you have a slider that allows you to basically rotate and move objects about using vector coordinates. So that's also very useful. It brings life to your projects like nothing, you know, where you have large scale environments with loads of objects and you've got nanite objects everywhere and you do want to also move them. So I would say this is far more useful for cinematics, but it can also be used in things like games. Also, don't forget to comment, like and subscribe to the video, and if you do, you will have a chance of winning all of my projects. I will announce the winner probably at the end of this month or the middle of next one. In this video later on, I am going to announce the winner for the last video where I made a giveaway. So we'll see who wins that. Just stay tuned. It will be in the middle of this video, I believe. So that's when you can find out who won all the projects. And then, as I said, if you're interested, like, comment and subscribe. Anything that you want to talk about in the comment section below, that's great. And then you get a chance of winning all of my projects from ArtStation, Patreon, or Gumroad. So let's not delay this any further. Let's begin the tutorial. We will start by using Blender as a start-off point, but you can use any other software if you'd like, as long as you know how to add Vertex paint to your meshes. Now, our first step in actually getting things done is to be in Blender. So I've got a scene over here in which I've got my mesh robot and just a basic scene. This particular technique is very useful when you want to animate elements on your meshes that you know, you don't necessarily want to do via bones, but because we are limited by the nanite structure of things and the world position offset is our only friend to allow us to animate nanite meshes apart from the socket method, then we're just gonna have to use the vertex information to be able to do it. Now, it's very cool to use this technique on things like these fans. You see this fan here at the back, so this would blow air or whatever, so you could animate that using the vertex color rather than using a bone or anything like that. So then, you know, going through the hassle of setting that up, because the material itself to get this to rotate is quite easy to set up in Unreal. and then it's also very easy to copy and paste to another mesh. We could do the same thing for the robots. So if I have a look in the scene, let me just disable the render view, and let's have a look at our robot. When you look here, you know, we could animate, for example, this side here, so it's got like a cylinder shape right about at this point, and we could have it, I don't know, whenever it's shooting something, these could sort of move, maybe even individually or at the same time. And then, you know, if I press space here, you can see these rotating, so I could get these fans to rotate as well using that type of method, and I wouldn't have to have a bone there. So that's very, very important. Now, our first step to get this going is effectively we'll select the mesh that we want to start vertex painting, and I'll show you a very quick method to do this. So with the mesh selected, it doesn't really matter, you can select anything. If I go into edit mode, then I am able to press L on the keyboard to select all these polygons. It's very important that the mesh that you're trying to add the vertex paint to, it's not connected to anything from a geometry point of view that you don't want to animate. So in this particular case, I'll want to take this piece and, you know, these things here and these bolts here at the side as well. And now if I press G, you can see that I'm going to be able to move all of this. The cylinders will stay where they are, and then I can, as I said, I can move that. I'm not going to do the other side. I mean, the same principle applies to both of these, but I'll just select this one. And then over in here, I'm just going to select the, I'm going to go to this tab over here, which is the object data properties. And I've got vertex group, shape keys, and somewhere down here will be the color attribute as well. Now, what I want to do is I want to press this button here and go to the vertex paint. And this will allow me to start painting, but I don't want to do any of that. Instead, because I've got the mesh selected from the edit mode, I can go over in here and select this button where it shows me like a geometrical face. So once I do that, then I can press the paint and then set vertex color. Now this is going to set it to white, so instead let's just do a sort of I'm gonna try and do a set value, so I'll do a 0.5. okay, and then I'm gonna press paint and set vertex colors. Now once I've done that, that should have effectively added the vertex color onto this mesh. Let's go into object mode and let's see if that happened. And the best way to check this is in your material shader, just add in a color attribute node and then plug this into your surface like that, and then select over here color, and this should show you that now we have a vertex color on this particular piece. Okay, so that's pretty cool. This has now written that information into the mesh. Now another thing, we could do the same thing for this fan. So let's just say we're going to want to export this entire piece, but I want this to spin. That's again, it's quite easy. We go into edit mode, select all of these polygons, and then we can go into our vertex paint. And we've got already, I'm going to select this option again in here. I'm going to select, I'm going to make sure that my vertex color is another value. So let's try 0.7. And then I'm going to select paint and set vertex color. And the same thing, if I really want to see if that worked out, I'm just going to go in color attribute, plug that in, and then select color. And yeah, this is already now done. And that's it. Now let's just, reset our materials to what they were rather than leaving them like that. So I'm just going to do that. And that's, that's a very basic setup for the vertex color, and it was quite easy to do. So now what we want to do is select, let's say we select the entire robot, and I want to export this for Unreal. Now before exporting, also another important thing to do is if we go back into the face mode over here where we had this mesh selected and everything else, we have the color and the elements that we wanted, and that's brilliant. But one thing that we also need to do is define the vertex color. So over here we've got the color attribute, but we have to create a new vertex group. So I'm going to click this button and then press the assign. When I have those meshes selected, I already selected to create a color. So assign, and you can name this to something else. So let's just say, I don't know, rocket pack, so that's now known as a rocket pack. And if you deselect it and just press the select button, it will do that. It will select that part. And it's the same thing here where you know, you need to go into edit mode, have all those selected, just create a new vertex color, call it, I don't know, fans for example, and just assign, and that will make sure that you are telling Unreal Engine that you've got as I said, you've got these vertex groups as well. Also very important, before you do the export, it would be quite useful if you already center the mesh into the center of the world. That's always a good thing to do. So what you want to do is you want to put your cursor to the world origin, and then you also want this to move to the cursor. And if we do it right, then we shouldn't really have any problem. But because we've done it with, you know, all three parts selected like that, it will move all of them in, you know, in a particular fashion that's not really adequate, because effectively it's sort of packed them all together based on their pivot point. So what we would want to do first is, let's just undo that. So we've got our pivot point in the center of the world, and we can, you know, for example, we could take this mesh and then just say Control P, and then just say object keep transform, and then we can have this and the legs, Control P, object keep transform. Now if I then select this part and say, you know, Shift S selection to cursor, then it will move the entire mesh over here, as you can see right there. And we can also now Alt P and clear and keep transformation. So then we have all of our meshes right here, and we will export the mesh with this particular pivot point. Now if you want, you can move these upwards a bit, something like that. So let me just get this out of the way. So we could just lift these up a bit more, something like that, and they should be okay in terms of the pivot point. Now we can export, like I've showed you earlier, and bring it in in Unreal Engine 5. So I'm going to go to File, Export, FBX. Make sure that we've got selected objects selected. I'm going to just put it in Downloads. And then over in here where it says geometry, make sure you set this to face for Unreal Engine purposes. And that's about it. Leave the vertex color to sRGB and then press export. Now I can do the same sort of thing for this particular mesh. So, you know, I'm just going to select all of these, and again, I'm going to go to File, Export, FBX, selected objects. I'm going to call that fan mesh, doesn't really matter, and then I'm just going to press export FBX, and the settings were pretty much saved. So now let's hop into Unreal Engine and start using that very, you know, setting up the you know, what we need to get this running. Time to pick the winner for the last giveaway. So I've just put the YouTube link in here. I'm going to filter duplicate users, and I'm not going to include replies to comments. But yeah, and that should be it really. And now 5 plus 6, that's 11. Then it will get me all my comments. So there are 16 unique comments on this video. And now I've got the option here where it says start. So let's see who won the all the projects. And we've got JG as Pacho. I'm hoping I say that right. So he says, I love the simplicity of the way you did the fog. It finally makes sense to me. All of these tips are so valuable. Thank you so much. You rock. Why, thank you as well. And you know what? I hope you enjoy the all the projects that I'm basically going to be sending over your way. So what I'll do is I'll add a comment in the section below, letting him know that he's won. Congratulations to JG as Pacho. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. But yeah, congratulations, and I hope you enjoy the project. So let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you soon. For all of you other guys who want to win all the projects on this channel, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you do, you get a chance in the next giveaway to win. So yeah, good luck. Now, importing is a very straightforward process. So in Unreal Engine, all you need to do is just go in your content browser, right click, and then look for the import option. You'll be, you will select the mesh that you want to import, and then you'll get the FBX import options. Now over in here, you've got the, an option to take the skeletal mesh, but if you do that, the build Nanite will disappear, so you cannot convert the skeletal mesh into Nanite. But we don't need to do that. We will leave Nanite on. And then over under the advanced tab, you've got the vertex color import option. Now, it's very important that you set this to replace, because the ignore option will ignore the vertex color of the FBX file, and the override will change it to the color that you've set in here. So what we want to do is replace, so we get the vertex color from the mesh that we're importing. You can also combine the meshes if you'd like. It really depends on what you're looking for. So, you know, everything else is up to you. Now you can press the import button and the mesh will come into the Unreal Engine content browser with its materials and textures already. Now here's our robot, and we can drop him in the world whatever we want. Let's just bring the mesh from the ground, and I'm just gonna set it around here. You can see the pivot point is right there on the ground. So we've got the textures, we've got the material set up, and now we can open that material. So we know that this particular piece is part of the hands material, so I'm just going to double click that, and then I'm going to bring it over here. Let me just drag it up at the top over like that, and this is where we're going to do all the magic, so to speak. And one thing that we want to do is we want to use the world position offset, but very importantly, we need to bring in a bit mask, and then we can pop that into the base color over there. Then we need to bring in a vertex color and plug this information into the bit. And then we need to have sort of the bit mask over here. Now, to do that, we can set up a parameter. So I'm just going to press 1 on the keyboard there just to get a value. And I'm going to plug that in there. I'm going to press apply. And we should see a change in our material. So if we go over here, we can see that the material is now completely black. If for some reason I cannot move my yeah, so that was so weird. I couldn't move my camera around. Anyway, right, so we're back in. So we've now added this stuff in here. Let me just bring that material back so we can see it, and you can see the mesh, as I said, is all black. Now what we need to do is in the material in here, we need to set up a number to tell Unreal Engine what mask we want to create based on the vertex color, and the bit mask number will decide what that is. Now, if you look at the bit mask there, it says provides a 1-bit mask from a supply grayscale image and a value between 0 to 255. So Unreal Engine will read this information between 0 to 255. But if we go back into Blender, if you go back into your vertex paint, and then you have a look over here on the color that we've set, it's a 0.7. So Blender sees between 0 to 1, while Unreal sees between 0 to 2.255. So effectively what you want to do is you want to take this 0.7. So I'm just gonna, I've got a calculator here. So if you do 0.7 divided by 255, it gives you this particular number. And what you are interested in is around this point. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, roughly around, that sort of information. Just copy that and then go back into Unreal Engine. And then you can paste this number in here and then press apply. Once you do that, you go back in here, you will notice that the mesh is black. But this one here where the mask is applied, where the vertex color is applied, now that's become white. So that's what we wanted. And if we go in here, we can put back our normal texture and we can press apply, and then the mesh will be back to normal. As it was with the normal texture involved, because we want to keep the normal texture, the actual texture, but we now have a mask and we know that's functioning. Now, for some reason, if for any reason, when you do this particular step here and you press apply, that the material isn't showing isn't showing you the mask, that means that in Blender, whenever you set up the material and the vertex group and so on, you didn't do it properly. So you just go back and redo it. Maybe delete the color attribute, make sure that the vertex group, you've got the polygon selected and you've assigned them, and do all the due diligence, and then export and try again. So let's just animate. We want to animate our mesh over to this point, or we can make it in a linear fashion or rotate. So I'm going to show you how to rotate and also move it in a linear fashion. Now what we want to do is, you know, get our material, as I said, back up to where it was, and we want to start adding the rest of the nodes to create the movement. And in order to do this, we will add a few multiply nodes. So, you know, let's just do about 3 multiply nodes. We can also keep the number 3 on the keyboard, left click to bring in a color node as well, and this is going to decide our linear movement. So for example, if we want to move on the Y value, we can set this to 1, and we can plug this into this particular multiply over here, and this multiply will go like that. And then the result of this bit mask will go in this multiply, and we can connect it over into our world position offset, which is now something that we can use with Nanite because obviously they've enabled it. So once we have that, we also need to add the time period. So I'm going to type in, bring in my time, and I've got this option in here where I can select a period. So I'm just going to do that at a 0.5. Then we can add a sine node so that we can sort of have a bit of a more, you know, a nicer animation. And then we need to bring in a saturate to make sure that we get the information, the data is it's clamped between 0 to 1. We can plug that saturate into this multiply over here. This multiply goes into the B value. So we're effectively saying, you know, we're telling based on the time period that we've set, we want to move that mesh, you know, that part of the mesh that's masked by the vertex color, that we want to move it on the y-axis. And we need to set up a sort of like a movement. You know, we've got to set up the movement of how much this, how big the movement will be. So you'll see what I mean by that. We're just going to add a scalar parameter. I'm going to call this tutorial. Oh, actually, I'm going to call it linear movement. Okay, and I'm going to plug that in there. I'm going to once it's plugged in, I'm going to press apply. With that done, we can actually go back into our mesh over here, and you'll notice nothing's really happening. Also, for some reason, the base color isn't coming back. I think it's just still preparing some shaders, but we should be okay. Now what I want to do, actually, yeah, it's very weird that it's not yet getting my my base color set up, but let me just have a look. Yeah, so that's, oh yeah, it's because I didn't actually plug the right node in there. I have to plug the base color, not whatever the hell the RGB alpha value of that wasn't right. So once we do that, we should be able to see our mesh back to its normal functioning. With that done, I want to create a material instance of this, so I'm going to go into my over here into my content browser, create a material instance, and I do want to add this into the hand slot. So I'm just gonna do that, and now it's added. I can double click the material instance. I've got it over here, and you can see that I've got now a linear movement setup. So I can put this to 1, for example, and you're noticing a bit of movement there. So let's just try 10 or maybe 50. And the bigger this number, the bigger the movement. You know, if I go to 100, you'll notice that the movement is even higher. This is a very weird animation to look at, but anyway, you get the idea. So this is moving on the y-axis now. So if we go back into our material, if we change this from, you know, put this to 0 and put this to 1, by the way, you can combine these in whatever way you want. We press apply and then go back to our showroom, okay, like that. And now you'll notice it's sort of doing a very weird movement of up and down, but that's what it does now. It can do an up and down. If you increase this to maybe 5 and then press apply, this should sort of change the direction. No, not change the direction, but, you know, emphasize it more. So you can see as Nanite gets, you know, you can see now that that movement is actually further away, and then you can play around with the time period and so on. So you know, it's very important that you sort of get the look that you're looking for. This is why I was telling you that this is very useful for background meshes or movements that you know you're not particularly looking at animating in a first-person perspective or anything like that. But anyway, you can see that we've got that moving over there. Now, what I want to do, instead of just linear movement, I want to rotate it around this cylinder point, and we can do that as well. This is why this technique is so powerful. Because when you animate Nanite Meshes. So for us really to do that, we can sort of use some partial code that we've already got in here, and I'm going to show you what we do. Let me just clean this up a bit by bringing these textures a bit down here, and we'll create the rotation at this point right here. Okay, now let's add the rotation. So the first thing, let's put an add node over here, and we can connect this point over like that, bring this into our world position. So we can now connect the rotation function over into this add node. We'll take this particular part of the code right here, and we'll bring it down. Now we're going to use the same value for our vertex color mask because we're effectively animating the same part of the mesh, but if you wanted to animate a different part, then you just have to have a different vertex color for that with a different number. Once we bring that in, we've got our bit mask and so on. With this particular node, this multiply can connect over into this add node since it is at the end point. But over into here, we need to add a rotate about axis node, and we can connect that over like that. And now we need to add some points into this. So the first thing in the position, we can bring a world position, and we can leave this as is. We don't need to modify it, just plug it in there. Then we need a sort of what we call in here, where the time period would connect, right? That needs to be in a multiply node that will go into the rotation angle. So we can add a multiply node over here that we are connecting to the rotation angle, and we can select the saturate point from here, plug it in like that. And then this number will decide, just like before the linear movement, this will decide the rotation. I need to add a scalar parameter, rotation movement, like that. And then we'll plug that in there. We'll leave it as a 0. For now, I don't want to add any information into it if I don't need to. Now, we need to determine a pivot point. So for that, we are going to we're going to just duplicate this number in here, and we'll leave this at a 0. We don't want anything for now. We don't want to tell it how it's rotating, but instead we'll bring a transform position node, and we'll leave it local space to absolute world space, because if you don't do this, then the animation will play completely wrong. So once you do that, you're now setting the pivot point to wherever the number, the vector coordinate will be set in here. But then we also need to normalize the rotation axis. So that's kind of the axis that we'll rotate on. So we'll copy this color yet again. And so this decides, right? This decides where the pivot is of the rotation. This decides in what direction we're rotating. Okay, so let's just say we want to rotate on the x-axis. That's fine. And then we can bring that over into the normalized rotation axis like that. Okay, now if we press apply, the node specifically should work, but we need to set up a rotation movement. So now this is showing up in our material instance, and I can go in here. I'm going to put this to 0, so it's no longer rotating linearly, but I am going to select the rotation movement and put that to a 5. Oh, maybe not a 5, maybe a 0.1, something like that. And you can see, right, where it's rotating. Now the pivot point seems to be somewhere around, the pivot point is wherever the world, the origin of this is, right? So that's the origin, that's where the pivot point is. So we need to set up a new pivot point, because we can't leave that to be 0, 0, 0. You could actually even name this as a pivot point if you wanted to, and this is the direction of rotation. So setting up the pivot point is we are going to require Blender to do this actually. Now in good old Blender over here, we have our mesh in the center of the world, which is where we wanted. So what I'm going to do, because we're calculating all the way from the center, so it's important that the mesh is where it was when you exported it. Just Shift A and then add an empty, so we can use plane axis like that. Now go into a side view, So, oh, this is, I'm gonna just select these and just, you know, get them to be the only things in the scene, separate them, isolate them. So with the empty selected, I can now sort of go from a side view, and I can then grab this and put it over in wherever the center is of this cylinder. So I'm just gonna eyeball it really around there, yeah? Now, if you go over in here, you can see the rotation, you can see the value. So we've got a minus 0.91 and a 5.6. Now, those are important because we're going to use those numbers straight into Unreal. So it's minus 0.91 and 0.5, and sorry, 5.6. So let me just put Blender to the side like that and bring up Unreal Engine, right? Okay, in here, we've got, so this is the value, which, let me just try and get it again. The value on the y-axis over here was minus 0.91, okay? And then the z was 5.6, okay? And now I'm gonna press apply. And we're going to go back into our, you know, over here into our mesh. And let's have a look at the rotation. Let's wait for that to update properly. Okay, it's rotated, but it's not really taking the pivot point for some reason. Oh, I think I know why. It's because I should have just done a minus. Let me just try minus 91 and see what happens. Sometimes it's important that you sort of like, let me just have a look. Yeah, still not doing it for some reason. Let me just troubleshoot this because it should be working unless it's because of what I've done here. So let me just try and do it on this axis and on the y-axis, and let's see what changes because that can also affect it. So let's see, once the materials compile. No, this is still not right. I've got back in Blender and I've just put the values that were found in Blender, which were precisely minus 0.91 and 5.6. Nothing else needs to change. We'll leave this as the one value. But one thing to note here is that basically what you need to do is you need to take the 5.6 meters in Blender, and so you can do 5.6 times 100, and that will give you the right value for the height. And then you've got the y value. It's basically minus 0.91 times 100, but that will give you minus 91 in Unreal. So what you really want to do is actually type in 91. So you go from a negative to a positive value, because if you leave it as a negative, let me just show you. Basically at a negative minus 91, you go in here, the animation is correct, but it's backwards. It's on the other side. So what you want to do is instead go to 91. You then press apply. So you've effectively changed the position now to here, to this cylinder. So you can see that it's now rotating from that cylinder, which is what we wanted to do. I have another example here with this same mesh being done on both. So you've got both of those there rotating as well. So this one is one, and that was with the second one. I'm just gonna quickly put together the same thing, but this time for the fan in Unreal Engine. Now, as you can see, we've got the fan and the side of the robot over there moving. And yeah, on the fan side of things, I definitely wouldn't decrease this below 1. Because if you do, then you'll get these sort of like step effects, and you definitely don't want that. So if you want it to look consistent, just put it at 1. And then if you go out of overview mode and just go at lit, you know, you can see sort of that movement in there. This sort of speed could be clamped down with additional nodes, but I don't want to, you know, add some more stuff into this. It's just what it is right now. And you can see there the movement. As I said to you, this is how you can animate specific meshes like that, and I think it's quite a useful technique because it definitely opens a world of possibilities, especially for cinematics. But I do hope you found that tutorial useful. I think it's quite transformational, at least for me. I am definitely going to be using this in a lot of things, and so far I'm still testing it and still finding new and better ways of using it. I hope you guys can get creative with it. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you have other ideas or of how to correct it, how to make it better, I'm really curious to see what you think. But yeah, thank you to the patrons, thank you to my supporters, thank you to the ArtStation people who, you know, keep buying the projects, people that support me on Creo, as I said, Patreon, and also on Gumroad. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Enjoy!